Coming up on Anarcho Agenda, I interviewed two people from ForkFest 2025, the precursor festival to the Porcupine Freedom Festival. This podcast is covered by the BIPCOT no government license. This allows for use and reuse by anyone except governments and or government agents. Learn more at bipcot.org. The Summer Libertarian Festival schedule is filled with various festivals like Freedom Fest, and the Bitcoin conference took place earlier in June, and Ross Ulbricht spoke there. This summer, in New Hampshire, two libertarian festivals took place. ForkFest, which is the precursor to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and PorcFest, aka the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I attended both this year, and these are some interviews I got from ForkFest 2025. This is episode 137 of Anarcho Agenda. I'm Riley Blake. You know, while the world is at war and bombs are falling in the Middle East, it's nice to get away and go to festival territory and celebrate liberty. Mr. Penguin, how long have you been going to ForkFest? And tell our listeners what ForkFest is.
Yeah, how long have I been going? I want to say like 2000, maybe 13. And what is ForkFest? Or I'm sorry, are we talking about PorcFest or ForkFest? Both. Okay. So PorcFest I've been going to since 2013, and I've been going to ForkFest since it began, which I don't know, what are we in, like the 5th year, maybe 6th year, something like that? It's actually quite a few ForkFests at this point. And what is ForkFest, right? So ForkFest is an alternative to the Porcupine Freedom Festival that kind of started as a pushback to hostility within the Porcupine Freedom or by Porcupine Freedom organizers in a particular year, and we thought that was getting a little bit too controlling, a little bit too not very liberty friendly. So ForkFest was started as a result of that. And when you begin to ban people and things over non-freedom related issues, and just be very controlling about all sorts of different little things, it's time to do a more decentralized event where nobody's in charge. There is no official name. ForkFest is just, that's the name that's kind of stuck, but it's also been known as Bandcamp, and I'm trying to think some of the other ones. But Somalia Fest was another one. But yeah, even the dates technically aren't official, even though there's a website called forkfest.party, but the website's unofficial. But for the most part, the dates on there are what we kind of as a group have kind of agreed are good dates for it. And usually it's been getting held more or less for the last couple of years at least, basically the week before the Porcupine Freedom Festival occurs. So
that sounds like a lot of fun. This is my first ForkFest and my first PorcFest, so I'm looking forward to PorcFest, even though it's gonna be crowded and crazy. And the big thing that you sell is computer stuff. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I'm kind of interesting. A lot of libertarians are, I would say a disproportionate percentage of libertarians that kind of lean more in the technical direction, more in the STEM fields. The libertarian people tend to be a little bit more on the autistic side rather than more the writing and reading, side of things. So anyway, but within sort of the technical niche, I actually do computers and technology that actually are sort of it's more of a libertarian approach to it. So we make sure that the hardware that we sell, the computers, the accessories, are in the user's control. So it's kind of like Now, technology is usually developed by corporations, not necessarily government specifically, but like companies like Microsoft, for example, they control what you do because there's no source code. Nobody can change it. If Microsoft does something you dislike, users are just, they're screwed, right? But with Linux and other free software operating systems, if a developer or an entity that's developing free software does something that the users don't like, well, the users can choose to fork it. And actually, that's going back to the name ForkFest. That's kind of why ForkFest, how it got its name and why it's stuck as ForkFest.
Yeah.
Because we forked the Porcupine Freedom Festival. So anyway, so basically, so I basically, my main goal is to make, to enable users to regain control over their technology. So things like, for example, your phone's spying on you, your computer is spying on you, and by giving people options as far as free software, well, most of the time, most of that free software isn't going to be spying on you. But if you use just about any, except for maybe Canonical, I'm thinking, but most of your distributions, Kaggle or Ubuntu, basically, there's might be a little bit of spyware in there, but most of your other distributions like Linux Mint or Trestle, they're not going to have any of that malware or spyware in there, so you can use those and gain a little bit more control over what your computer is doing, just by picking out a decent choice of distribution.
So it sounds like you're really trying to protect the privacy of your customers.
Yeah, protect the privacy of my customers. And it's not just about privacy; it's about control, right? Because if Microsoft decides to send every keyword that you type back to Microsoft, they can do that. If Amazon decides to say you're maybe on your phone or your Echo device, if you give it a command, it's sending your voice back to Amazon, and it's so I guess that could be a lot of that's a privacy aspect of those examples, but there's I'm trying to think of some other examples that are not really privacy oriented, but maybe they're economic examples. I have a good economic example. So there's a company called VMware. Well, there was a company called VMware, and they were bought by Broadcom recently, and they create virtualization software. Well, it used to be, I think they gave away some of this stuff for free, in the sense that it doesn't cost anything, but it was proprietary. But then they and they licensed their software too. So basically, what happens is there was a certain amount that you had to pay for it, but when Broadcom bought the software, they started charging license fees that were, I don't know, like something like some ridiculous amount, like 20 times the cost of the licenses previously. So you don't have control, and it's even worse with the case with the VMware and Broadcom, because they actually sort of took away people's ability to use the software they had already licensed, because of support contracts that existed, like I think alongside the licenses. So I mean, basically, like, something you were paying $50 for, now you have to pay $500 per computer for, or something along those lines. And companies can do this, but when you're using free software, no company can do that, because if a company was producing free software and they decided to no longer release it as free software, well, anybody else could fork that software and release a version of it, independent of that company. So this is one of the reasons why free software is very important.
Sure. Now, where can people find your business?
Oh yeah, I never tell anybody, but people ask me about my business all the time, and I always forget. Like, I don't even tell them where to go. So if you're interested in computers and accessories that are in your control, it's thinkpenguin.com is the website, and there should be a phone number there as well if you ever want to reach us too.
Excellent. I know you're an advertiser on the show, so I wanted to sit down with you and talk a bit more about your company and.
That's right.
The Free State Project.
That's right. You know what? I forgot. That's right. We started advertising with you guys, huh?
Yeah. So that's exciting for me. I'm glad to have you on board. And what brought you to New Hampshire? Because we've never really gotten to that.
Oh, yeah. So I moved to New Hampshire in 2016 as a result of, I want to say the Free State Project, but that's a little inaccurate. What led me here was Free Talk Live and a guy named Ian Freeman, and especially, and a bunch of other liberty-oriented folks in New Hampshire that are part of the Free State Project, or were part of the Free State Project at least. advocating for greater liberty, peace, and freedom, basically. And it was the Free State Project specifically that was the migration, and Ian and Free Talk Live, which is a radio show, right? Did a really good job on selling it, and it wasn't just Free Talk Live, but there's a great documentary called Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree, and it's a little dated now, but it's absolutely fantastic with kind of giving you an idea of what we're trying to do in New Hampshire. So it's basically how would you describe Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree? It's
Derek J, who was a mover to New Hampshire for a bit, who did a lot of activism in his time. He was willing to go to court,
get arrested,
get arrested for non-violent crimes.
Yeah, it was like basically civil disobedience, and but not violent, nothing violent. It was all peaceful protests kind of stuff. And I forget how many days he ended up getting caged for, but he wouldn't pay fines, and he'd rather sit in a cage, over whenever he was convicted of something, he'd rather sit in a cage for it. And he wasn't the only one doing this, but he sort of led the way, I think, in that kind of activism in a lot of ways. And it's interesting in New Hampshire. There's a lot within the Free State Project community, and libertarians that move here. There's a lot of different kinds of activism that goes on, and this is just one particular kind of activism, that has gone on over the years. It's not really ever stopped. This kind of activism is kind of still going on. Or similar stuff where people are getting arrested over usually stupid stuff and they're fighting it. But there's all sorts of different kind of angles and aspects and ways to do it. And there's also other kind of activism that people do. At least I consider doing, say, for example, so I actually am a co-host of Free Talk Live, and I consider that to be a little bit of activism there too. Getting on once a week or whatever, and advocating for peace and liberty, and for people to move to New Hampshire so that we can group together, like minds can group together to eventually, basically politically take over a state for the purposes, of reducing violence. And
right.
And the problem is the state is violence. Every time you pass a law, it's backed by the state, which is violence. So when you start thinking about things, rationally, you should really be resisting passing a law to prohibit something, because that's thus going to end up creating a situation, especially when the law is against somebody doing something peaceful. It's one thing if you pass a law against somebody doing something violent, because violence then that's more kind of like self-defense, right? And so it's reasonable to defend oneself if necessary with violence, but it's not reasonable to defend oneself with violence against somebody saying something mean about you, right?
Sure. Excellent. So you mentioned that the government or the state is violence. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, so the state, I mean, so it's kind of like, how do you define the state, right? It's kind of the largest gang with it's sort of a gang, really, and they have the power to commit violence with impunity. And so that it might be, in some respect, that might be okay to the degree that it's only using violence against violent actors. But the problem is most of the crimes that people are charged with or convicted of are, they're the acts that they're the laws they're violating are not laws that are prohibiting a violent act. They're peaceful things that they've done, and maybe they've gone a little too fast on the road, or maybe they didn't wear a helmet while riding a bike. Those things didn't hurt anybody else, and it's wrong to then go and use violence or theft, for that matter, to either fine them or to put them in a cage. Maybe they won't pay the fine, or maybe they are unable to pay the fine, and so the state cages them. So they violently, physically take them and put them in a cage, and that's wrong.
I agree with you there. Thanks, Chris, for your time. I really appreciate it. In this digital age, your information is everywhere on the internet, ready to be used by bad actors. From your social security number to where you live, even your bank details may be out there. It is purely the mere number of others in the same camp that has protected the majority. For nearly 2 decades, ThinkPenguin.com has been developing solutions to protect your privacy. Take back your privacy by going to ThinkPenguin.com and buying Linux-based hardware and software to get back some resemblance of your digital privacy. That's ThinkPenguin.com. Now, Hef, what brought you to New Hampshire?
Wow. It all started out of boredom. I clean offices at night, janitorial stuff, and I didn't feel like listening to music because I guess during that time I was like, nah, I don't want to listen to music. I want to hear people talking about stuff. Because I used to hear in Puerto Rico, where I was born, I used to hear this one talk show at night called Mega Chat from the Mega Estación. I forgot the name of the number of the station. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I love that. I thought, yeah, I like to hear people talk and talk about their problems or talk about whatever they wanted. And I was looking for that. So I don't know what I used, probably Google. But I used some search to find out where can I find some talk radio like that, and boom! Somehow I got. It's like I don't know. It had to be, but Free Talk Live showed up, and I started listening to it, and I started immediately clicking and agreeing to a lot of the things that they were talking about. And loving how people would call in and talk about whatever they wanted. And that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And one thing led to another. They were talking about libertarianism, which I had no idea what that was. I only knew the binary, the Democrat and Republican thing. That's all I knew. And then there's this libertarian thing that started popping up, and all of the things that they were talking about, I happen to agree with naturally. Just you be free, as long as you do not aggress against other people, and as long as things are consensual, if that's the way to live life. And I was like, hell yeah, that was it. And a few years later, that next year, I think they were advertising Pork Fest during that show.
Porcupine Freedom Festival.
Mm-hmm, the Porcupine Freedom Festival. And then I visited the next year, 2014, and I met so many amazing people. That was the first festival I've ever been to ever. And the people were amazing. It's like I felt like I felt like I found my people, not blood, but mind.
Yeah.
So in mind. So and then I met people there. I met Ian Friedman. I met Mark Edge back at that time. And a few other podcasters that I was interested in. And also the whole Bitcoin scene started, at least for me, popping up during that time as well. I got into it, and I don't know, I went that year, then the next year, then I didn't go a few years because of, personal problems, money stuff. I don't want to get into that.
Sure.
But then I came back during the COVID thing, when that COVID thing was happening. And that was a nice experience up here because it was very, very intimate, because only I guess, quote unquote, the boldest came over here.
It sure sounds that way. I was still in Utah at that time, so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. So, yeah, and it was much more intimate during 2020, and no one was, afraid with the wearing masks or anything like that, or forcing others like, hey, you need to wear a mask here. None of that.
Yeah.
None of that. Yeah, there may have been one.
Side.
There was maybe one or two guys around, I remember here, that did that. But for the most part, it was pretty chill. And anyway, that was my long story to tell you that I found my people here. I am a part-timer. I have committed to the state that I'm living in right now. We bought a house there. But I feel like, every chance I get, I come up here and just experience this wonderful time. Porkfest and Forkfest, which I've been doing since 2020. It's the first time I did the Forkfest. I don't know all the behind the scenes, and I don't want to, I may know a few, but I don't want to say all that stuff. All I know is that it is like a pre-party to the party,
Right.
and it's more intimate.
It
If
sure
I could
feels
say
that way. There are fewer people here to distract you. There are fewer events unless you create your own. So it's really nice to have that nice, intimate touch with people who value libertarianism and value liberty.
Yeah, it is. So, I mean, I'm a man of short words. I don't know what else to say. I love the people here. I wish I could have gone up here and found a nice little house up here. Long story, but it's I try to get up here as many times as I can.
So I'm sure New Hampshire is glad to have you no matter when you come.
Cool. I feel that way too, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me on Anarcho Agenda. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Riley.